When I look at this huge crowd, brothers and sisters, I have no doubt that the political revolution is going to sweep this country.
The reason why they make the answer to all of these things, collectivization and more government, is what they're really after is power. All of this is just a means to an end, and the end is control, power and control. That's what socialism is, and that's what's driving these people. Whether it's through class conflict, whether it's through grievance politics, victimization, global warming, you name it, the answer will always be putting more power in their hands.
As we've seen, socialists no longer base their arguments solely on the promise to redistribute wealth or provide people with more control over the workplace. To many socialists, those ideas, once the very bedrock of socialist ideology, now seem very 20th century, out of date in an era when the most ferocious debates center on issues of identity, gender, and race.
Members of the jury, have you reached a verdict? If you'll please fold the verdict form and hand it to Deputy Jarvis.
In February of 2012, 17-year-old African-American Trayvon Martin was fatally shot by Hispanic-American George Zimmerman in what Zimmerman called an act of self-defense. More than a year later, the trial drew national attention, and the verdict set off a firestorm of protest.
We, the jury, find George Zimmerman not guilty. So say we all.
Trayvon Martin was you. Yes. Trayvon Martin did matter.
Yes. In response to the verdict, 3 women came together in 2013 to form the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, a nonprofit organization that by 2020 was raising more than $90 million a year. Opal Tometi, Alicia Garza, and Patrisse Cullors made no secret of their background.
The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
In a statement that has since been removed from the Black Lives Matter website, the founders wrote, "We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure." They also claim, "We do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift Black trans folks, especially Black trans women."
The people who founded BLM-GNF are Marxists, who say they're Marxist, who say that they're either trained Marxists, in the case of Patrisse Cullors, or in the case of Alicia Garza, that she has studied Marxism-Leninism, and that Marxism-Leninism has been used by societies for decades to overthrow oppression. They want to dismantle the organizing principle of society. That is a very large and ambitious goal. Do most Americans who put up signs of BLM signs on their lawn know this? No, I don't think so.
Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Melissa Harris Perry, Patrisse Cullors, and Professor Angela Davis.
First of all, Angela Davis is the most important intellectual mentor of the Black Lives Matter founders. Angela Davis, for those who many people don't know, is a communist. She runs on the Communist Party ticket twice as vice president. She is given the Lenin Peace Prize by the most repressive regime of the satellite regimes, East Germany. She is a Black Panther, and she's very active today. She goes to universities, fills up auditoriums, gets up and says, "I'm a communist, I've always been a communist," and the students rise up and give her a standing ovation because they have no idea what communism means.
We really need a revolution. We really need a revolution. We need a revolution. and I don't have to tell you that.
You sure don't.
So we have a direct connection, actually, between Marcuse, Angela Davis, and Black Lives Matter.
Please help me welcome the one and only Nikole Hannah-Jones.
To mark the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first African slaves on America's shores, the New York Times launched the 1619 Project under the direction of journalist Nikole Hannah-Jones. According to the Times, the project's purpose is to reframe the country's history, understanding 1619 as our true founding and placing the consequences of slavery and the contribution of Black Americans at the very center of the story we tell about who we are.
What if I told you that the year 1619 is as important to the American story as the year 1776? What if I told you that America is a country born of both an idea and a lie?
The 1619 Project is an attempt to rewrite the American narrative, to put slavery at the center of it, and saying it's the most important thing in American history, slavery and then what followed from it, and do away with any other of the inspiring parts of the American narrative that people might want to look at.
We would not be the United States were it not for slavery.
The 1619 Project's purpose is to do what socialists have been doing for a long time, and that is to throw doubt upon this nation, its principles, its founding, and to question its purpose.
When the country's founding documents were written by enslavers, they were false.
I think the 1619 Project is very damaging, but I also think it's come under a lot of pushback. I mean, anti-slavery is also part of the American narrative, not to mention things like faith and freedom, economic opportunity, technological innovation, immigration. There are many aspects to the American story, and it's a great story. We can't just focus in on one very bad thing and say, that's it for everybody and we're guilty forever.
Providing the framework for both the 1619 Project and Black Lives Matter is an approach to history called critical race theory, or CRT, an adaptation of critical theory, which was developed more than a half-century ago by the Marxist scholars of the Frankfurt School.
We don't even have to know how we've learned to think about Black people as more criminal, as more scary, or in the case of trans kids, as more muscular, and so will automatically be frightening to these little white girls. We don't even have to know how we learned that. It is embedded in our culture.
Well, critical race theory just applies the ideas of critical theory to the problem of racism in America. So it says the problem of racism isn't just one individual's reaction to another individual. It's not just individual bigotry. It's because the system that was set up, America itself, is founded on things that either facilitate or entail racism. The American Revolution and the American founding itself are all about slavery and therefore all about racism. If you want to get rid of racism in America, it's not good enough to just say that everybody should be nicer to each other. You have to dismantle the American civilization itself.
The ideas that are expressed in the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. They are endowed with certain unalienable rights, is dispensed with. Critical race theory replaces that idea of individual rights with group rights. So this notion of equality is dispensed with. When statues are attacked, when a statue of Thomas Jefferson is torn down, what is being knocked down are these ideals that he has come to express of having our rights come not from the government, but from the Creator, and that we should be treated equally under the eyes of the law. What replaces that is this notion that the government must guarantee equal outcomes. Our rights do not come from a creator, they come from the government. And this notion of equality, individual rights, equal justice under the law, is considered to be a farce.
The New York Times has been criticized for lending its weight to the 1619 Project. Historians lined up to condemn what they see as factual errors, as well as what they see as the project's misinterpretation of key events and false portrayal of historic figures.
When you have an ideological movement like critical race theory that's starting with a political presupposition of socialism is desirable, what they're doing is they're inverting the evidentiary process of doing history, because they've already said, here's the answer of what we want politically. Let's look back to the past and try to bend it and manipulate it around to fit that. The 1619 Project is absolutely guilty of that. They've started with a modern-day political agenda, and rather than seeking out evidence, rather than trying to encompass a broad array of documents, testimonials, historical perspectives, what they do is they start cherry-picking bits and pieces of evidence that only align with a desired political narrative. Those are hallmarks of bad history, and they're hallmarks of ideological history.
The 1619 Project is also an educational initiative. According to the New York Times, more than 4,000 school districts have adopted its materials. Parents across the country are pushing back, saying they don't want critical race theory taught in their children's classrooms. It is part of a larger debate over who decides what gets taught in American public schools.
I don't really understand this idea that parents should decide what's being taught. I'm not a professional educator. I don't have a degree in social studies or science. We send our children to school because we want them to be taught by people who have an expertise in the subject area.
Yeah, socialism is popular today. It's because people are not taught about the true history of socialism.
This is why we send our children to school and don't homeschool, because these are the professional educators who have the expertise to teach social studies, to teach history, to teach science, to teach literature.
Every time a survey is done of young people, a larger percentage of them believe that socialism or even communism is better than our form of government.
We're here today because we believe in education, not indoctrination.
More than 40 states have moved to limit the teaching of critical race theory in public schools. Texas has banned teachers from using the 1619 Project in the classroom. And in Florida, the campaign against CRT goes beyond education.
But we also understand the bill that we're signing is called the Stop Woke Act. And the reason what it stands for, woke, is Stop Wrongs Against Our Kids and Employees Act. Because unfortunately, you've seen employees, mostly working for major Fortune 500 companies, that get subjected to this same type of ideology in the guise of workforce training.
Critical race theory has moved from colleges and universities to the public schools to the corporate boardroom. Private companies now set diversity goals, incorporate CRT language and principles into employee training, and work CRT talking points into their advertising.
Melina Abdullah.
Levi's employed the founder of BLM Los Angeles to deliver a message designed to sell more than just blue jeans.
My deepest hope is that all of the energy that we've poured into Black Lives Matter, all of our radical imaginings that we can build a world where everybody has all of what they need and most of what they want, will come to pass in the immediate term.
The long march through the institutions envisioned by radicals in the 1960s, has now reached Wall Street and corporate America.
Capitalism, as we know it, is dead. This obsession that we have had with maximizing profits for shareholders alone has led to incredible inequality and a planetary emergency.
We need a new dashboard for the new economy, and that needs to encompass people, planet, prosperity, and institutions.
And that's all about getting the right people in the right place at the right time.
The long march through the institutions has been very successful. I mean, particularly on college campuses. And it's kind of infested the thinking, certainly in schools where free thought now is sort of not in fashion, which is what universities were supposed to do. But also now you have a bureaucratization of it. It's not just taking over existing institutions, it's building new bureaucracies. And so these sort of diversity bureaucracy that's in corporations, or it's in the NFL, or it's universities, their whole premise is, well, there's this huge problem and we're going to have this, vice president for diversity who's going to fix it. It's not in that person's interest to fix anything. It's in that person's interest to make it worse, because their whole job is predicated on a problem. And so these bureaucracies just grow and they create more controversy and more problems. And the answer to that is always, well, let's have bigger budgets and more people.
The condemnation of critical race theory comes not just from parents and conservative politicians. Old school socialists argue that all this attention on race and gender undermines the fundamental Marxist insight that there is only one division that really matters, the one that separates the working class from the capitalists. To them, everything else is a distraction.
There's socialists who still believe that it is possible for workers to unite and to overthrow the government and enact a socialist government. And we've seen this in reaction to the 1619 Project at the World Socialists website. They have produced some very good historical critiques of the 1619 Project. They are angry about the 1619 Project because it's using critical race theory. Of course, they always wind it up with this message that, the workers do need to unite.
It is not good enough for somebody to say, I'm a woman, vote for me. No, that's not good enough.
For democratic socialists like Bernie Sanders, critical race theory and identity politics pose a challenge.
In other words, one of the struggles that you're going to be seeing in the Democratic Party is whether we go beyond identity politics. I think it's a step forward in America if you have an African-American head of CEO of some major corporation. But you know what? If that guy is going to be shipping jobs out of this country and exploiting his workers, doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot whether he's black or white or Latino. All right, and I know, some people may not agree with me, but that is the fight that we're going to have right now within the Democratic Party. The working class of this country is being decimated.
Please welcome Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham.
Bernie Sanders is kind of a relic of my generation.
Well, Senator Sanders, you chuckled before when Senator Graham mentioned socialism. And so I want to let you deal with that about directly
I understand
socialism.
we could do red baiting. I guess it works among a certain part of the population.
Well, you're a socialist, aren't you?
I am a democratic socialist.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The exciting young figures of the contemporary left, several of them enrolled in old left socialist organizations. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and Congresswoman Tlaib are members of Democratic Socialists of America. And I was just reading some tweet that organization had put out recently, which is bring to birth a new world on the ashes of the old. With a fantastic slogan from old socialist days, which really meant we're going to burn down the whole existing society to have a tabula rasa to build the great new society. The interesting thing is their charisma doesn't come from talking about socialism. It comes from the racial vector, from talking about how they represent demographic groups that have been oppressed, that have had the short end of the stick. Just the scales have to be reversed. So in terms of who's on bottom and who's on top, that is, it's not equal benefits or equal goods for every individual, which was the idea of socialism, but it's equal benefits for every ethnic group. You could make an argument that that's a 21st century form of socialism, but it's not the same old socialism that was born in the 19th century.
The old Marxist idea of class solidarity was meant to unify around the world all of the working people. So now you have these identity politics people who in fact are creating divisions, by coming up with different grievance groups and then trying to put all the grievance groups together. But part of the problem with this is, number one, it doesn't create solidarity, it just creates new types of conflict. And number two, not everybody likes being thrown into an identity group and then being told what they think. The theory that the Democrats will have a majority in the future because of the growth of Hispanics and blacks and other Asians and so forth. But it turns out that Hispanics are gravitating more and more towards the Republican Party. Even African Americans are gravitating away from this kind of socialist vision. And so suddenly the collectivists have no idea what to do because their identity model is fundamentally flawed.
There's no doubt that the socialism of 21st century America is different from the socialism imagined by Marx and Engels almost 200 years ago. But at its root, its appeal is still the same. The idea that human beings can be remade, that the solutions to society's largest and most vexing problems lie in the realm of government. And while the long-promised revolution may not come soon, it remains the ultimate objective.
Socialism does a very good job of appealing to some fundamental human values, and in particular to fundamental American values. Those three values are freedom, fairness, and community. If we see that there is something wrong with America in terms of its fairness, what is happening to young black men and their interactions with police, that's seen as fundamentally unfair. Socialism has an answer there. How can you possibly be free if you don't have that access to capital that other people have? Socialism has an answer there. We see our communities falling apart. Again, socialism has an answer there. And therefore, it does a very good job of speaking to fundamental American values. And that's why it's always going to be there. As long as we have those problems, it has some easy answers.
I think in some respects, the collectivist socialist impulse is winning. Certainly, it's insinuated itself into the media, into universities, into government, even into corporate boardrooms. But I don't think in the long run they will win because it's essentially an anti-human, anti-individual, anti-American agenda. And that the American people, in their multitudes, they don't want a lot of this. And when people properly understand the degree of social control that these other people want over their lives, they'll just say no.
In 1949, a group of intellectuals published a collection of essays titled The God That Failed. In it, each author detailed how the promise of a socialist heaven on earth led only to economic disaster and political tyranny. Socialism in practice has not improved its record since. Despite its failure in the real world, the promise of socialism continues to attract new adherents, in part because its proponents persist in adapting it to our ever-changing world. It seems that whatever the problem, Socialism is there with an easy answer. Whether Americans are willing to pay the price for those solutions, measured in both personal wealth and individual freedom, remains to be seen. Thanks for watching. If you haven't seen my other history series, you can check out the Unauthorized History of Socialism Part 1, as well as other unauthorized histories on other topics, right here on Fox Nation. And keep watching for more unauthorized histories as we continue to look at America's story in new and different ways. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, I'm Brett Baer.